Michigan City Tree Board, regular meeting, September 30th, at Krieger Hall. Call the roll call, please.
Okay. Billy Gonzagas, here. Becky Anderson, absent. Laura Pop, present. Clark Ginther, present. Matt York,
I am also present.
Alina Emerson, absent, and Laura Henderson, here. Okay, we do have a floor.
All right, it's good to see everyone. All right, approval of the minutes from March 4th. Oh, God, these. Everybody have a chance to look them over?
I move for approval. Second.
Everybody in favor? Okay, the minutes have been approved from March 4th. Okay. Secretary Treasurer's report. We got a couple months here to deal with, so please bear with us.
I move for approval for the March, April, May, and June, and July. Forgot about this.
Everybody's in favor?
Aye.
The Secretary Treasurer's report for, that would be for February, March, April, May, June, July, and August. That's only to the end of July, so it's not August. I guess we'll deal with that one next month. Okay, claims. Claims, we'll go through these. April 1st was Debbie Wilson for Secretary Services because there was no meeting, there was no board member compensation. That also applies to May, June, July, and for August and September. This will be for Debbie Wilson $200 and for board member compensation for the attendees for tonight's meeting.
Move for approval. Second.
Everybody in favor?
Aye.
The claims for the last 6 months. Yes, 6 months. Hard to believe it, it's been that long. Okay, communications. Communications. Okay, very no communication. Committee reports. That's outreach. That's myself, Nicole, Clark, and Laura Henderson. Anything, ladies?
Just a reminder to get on with your insured, licensed arborists if you need any of your oaks trimmed through basically the months of October through March. You're finding it to get closer to April. It's getting a little too warm. It just will depend on the season. But just to keep the oaks really safe, sign up with your licensed, insured arborists right now to get those trimmed or removed as well. It's a good thing to do it during the winter months, the cooler months. It's also a good time for specific other trees to be trimmed, just to keep them a little safer from outdoor activity and outdoor activity. So be aware of that at this time.
I've also noticed on the trees, especially the oaks, we had such a weird spring where it was cold quite late in the season where it had snowed with the buds on the trees. A lot of the oaks took quite a hit, and with the drought now, they're all the ones that were suffering have succumbed. So you can see a lot of that out there. And I can't believe it, it's really shocking to see it. There's several other issues out there that people need to look into, call their arborists, and they can hopefully help you, direct you in the safest way to go about either removing or taking care of the issues. Nothing else under public relations or Arbor Day, public events this year. Gardening tips, Laura, and we just kind of went through that.
And like what you said too, if anybody is looking, has constant issues with their trees, especially, or certain types of plants, now is the time for, if there's any systemic drenches that last, there's 12-month drenches that can be put down, there's injections that can be done by professionals. Now is usually the time because it's right before they go into dormancy and they absorb all that up right at this time. Fertilization is important as well, and being specific about your fertilizers for what time of the year you're doing that and how much you're putting down is really important for the health and safety of those plants as well. So I do want to remind people of those types of things because this is a proper time. And I think another thing is to just be really careful. We have a small window really for just another 2 to 3 weeks where evergreens are safe to still trim, including small evergreen shrubs and things like that, specifically basswood, because they'll push off into growth and we will have freezes that'll happen. And it's already showing actually pretty cold, pretty early. So being aware of those types of things and only trimming over the next couple of weeks when it comes to evergreens will protect them as we head through the winter. And then you will have more of a pocket as you head into next season if you do need that done as well.
Anything else in any of these items?
I think I don't know if we'll be able to do for Arbor Day this time, but I think we had thought that it's important to order the trees early, starting in October, so.
I guess just for the Arbor Day, Jessica, we had like a drive-through tree giveaway.
We did. It was really fun, actually. So we have saplings, and we just sort of set up a drive-through through that north parking lot of City Hall. And myself, Skylar York, and Shannon Eason, and Barb, a couple other volunteers showed up and just had a drive-through. People would pull up, give us their order, and we'd bag it up and send them home. So we got all the saplings, except for maybe 5 or 6, got picked up that day. It was great.
And my tree is still living.
Thank you, Barb.
My tree is still living.
And say thank you to Skylar for his late, but city park trees, the forester. Anything going on?
Yeah, I just did it actually about a month ago and followed up today. We've had a pretty big maple that needs to come down over at the golf course. It's got a lot of basal rot. It's getting pretty soft and it's like right over the clubhouse. So we kind of had to move quickly on that one and contract that one out. We did get the trees that were scheduled to go in March for that planting event that we were scheduling or planning on having before COVID hit. The ones that are along Lakeshore Drive. We got in touch with NISCO and with Dogwood Hills Tree Farms, and they came out and set the trees out by their specific locations. And then the then park superintendent, Jeremy Keenan, and assistant superintendent Shannon Eason, myself, and a couple of other parks employees got those into the ground, thankfully, so they're doing well along Lakeshore Drive. So that happened.
Okay. Anything else in there? Or we slide right over to the city trees.
I have some pruning and stuff on the schedule for over at Winding Creek Cove, those young trees that are in there. That's on the radar for this year. So hopefully we'll have time to go over there and take care of those.
Now, the watering situation, because of this, were we able to, I know you mentioned that there were some issues with the watering truck, and they've been resolved.
Yeah, for the most part. So the truck that I have that I drive is really old. It's about 25 years old. And so it just, things come up, and it's got to get fixed. But we were able for city trees and the ones that we put along Lake Shore Trail here, we keep those pretty well watered.
Good.
Yeah, it's a tedious process. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. Watering 230 trees. But it's the favorite part of my job, actually. It's really peaceful. It does require a lot of time.
Okay. What do you want, I see you have a presentation for us.
Yeah, I figured it would be easier to just talk through and show you guys a little bit of like what we were able to accomplish. I think everybody knows it was a really hard year for everybody, and we're not through it yet. But we did get a couple of big things done that I wanted to update you all on. So I can just click through that really quickly.
Sure.
So the two major things that we were able to get done this year were, of course, we got our right-of-way asset inventory completed, which includes our new tree survey. And then, kind of just by the hair on our chin, we were able to pull off the spring planting project, that I had been planning with you all, updating you on last fall and into the winter. And we were able to get those trees in the ground, and I'm going to update you on that project as well. So really quickly, this is just kind of a screenshot of our 2010 tree survey. It included a lot more than rights of ways, and it included different parts of the city. That's essentially an 10-11-year-old tree survey. And so we've gotten that grant last year to go ahead and update it. This grant that we got this year focused a little bit differently, so it included only right-of-way trees. It was completed from March to May of 2020. The firm that completed that for us is HLR Engineering. So all Michigan City right-of-way trees, and also included light poles and trash cans. So we came up with a total of 7,469 trees, 2,668 light poles, and 85 trash cans. The grant was funded through INDA. The project total was $91,375, and it was an 80% federally funded with a 20% local match. Our share came out to $18,275 for the local match, and the redevelopment commission paid for $10,000 of that, and then my department paid the remaining $8,275. And in the end, we have this really great GIS-based system of all of the trees that are in our city right-of-ways. And this is just a snapshot of it as well. They performed, a health assessment of every single tree, gave it a color-coded rating, good, fair, poor, dead. Other, it typically needs a stump. And also there's excellent. And so you really get a good visual of how our urban forest, at least in our city right-of-ways, is faring right now.
Looks kind of marginal.
Pardon?
Looks kind of marginal.
What do you mean?
Just as, the tree can't be, the majority of the fair to poor condition.
Right. And that's what I'm going to talk about is
These colors, it's very hard to just glance at that and tell the difference between excellent and dead.
Right. Oh, it is?
They look the same to me. Yeah.
Well, I probably didn't choose the best picture. Like, you can zoom into this on individual trees, and click on individual trees and get the pull-up all the information, the DBAs, the health rating, the structure rating. They thought it pertinent that there was something else they should note. They also provided notes for me. So if they saw something, like there's a trunk move or, there's evidence of pruning history, like they would notate that stuff as well. And you can see that when you click on individual trees. So when you click on an individual tree, you get that screen that pops up on the left there. And then all this is also in a huge Excel sheet. That's where they've also got additional notes for each tree. So it's got, species, DBH, health, and then other concerns, and then the exact GIS location for each of them. There's still a lot that I'm going to spend a lot of time learning what we can do with this. I'm meeting with the GIS coordinator, emailing and calling and going through his office pretty frequently, and this thing's kind of settled down for the fall. I'm going to sit down with him a little bit more and see what kinds of data, what kinds of reports I can pull from this. I'm really excited to kind of get into the data a little bit more and see what we really got. So,
just say for the record here, a lot of this investment will help move toward grants and type of applications as far as the city and the state.
right. We here all know the importance of our right-of-way trees. They can account for up to 20% of the entire tree canopy for the municipality. They add value in terms of, aesthetics, home value, safety, air temperatures, stormwater retention, air quality, carbon sequestration, and just overall quality of life in urban settings. One of the things to know is that we do have a lack of diversity in our right-of-way trees, in our street trees. I think about 20% of them are silver maples, which have, as most of us know, a particular kind of reputation. That's followed by, red maple, and crab apple and honeywood. It's like those are the 4 species that are really dominant in our canopy here. And so obviously moving forward, we need to diversify that a little bit more. In terms of health and structure, there's some good and some bad. A lot of our trees, in terms of health and in terms of structure, were rated fair. But we do have a considerable amount of trees that are rated poor in terms of health and structure. As I mentioned in my presentation to the City Council, structure is a huge part of, trees' overall life standard of trees' health. A tree can be displaying, really strong, bigger, but if it has poor structure, that increases the likelihood of failure, obviously. So that's something that I'm really concerned about. Nearly, 30% of our trees are rated poor in terms of structure, and fair, like 44% are rated fair. So those that are in the fair category, that also concerns me as well, because that's something that we're going to have to spend a lot of time, money, and effort to maintain them, so that they don't decline any further. So thinking a little bit more about it, notice that nearly half of our right-of-way trees are in fair condition, which is something that hopefully we can maintain going forward. The not so good, as what I mentioned, is that poor structure. That really is central to overall tree health and survival into maturity. And then again, the lack of diversity. Silver maples, as we know, are fast growing and very popular because of that, but they are weak-wooded, they typically exhibit poor form. They don't compartmentalize decay very well, so they do incur injury. Even if it is a proper pruning cut, we don't close them very well, which invites decay and other problems. And they're very overplanted, and this is not something that Michigan City is alone in. This is pretty much across the board in many municipalities across the country that silver maples were just overplanted because of their popularity. So we're not the only city that's sort of struggling with that problem. The other thing I wanted to update you on was the planting that we did in the spring. had the trees from Dogwood Hills Tree Farm put into our city rights of ways, mostly in that Midtown neighborhood. I think of a good reference point for that. A little bit south of 11th Street, south and east. Those were, if you guys recall, they were purchased and tagged over the fall and winter of 2019. I think I finished the tagging like in early January 2020. They went into the ground in March of 2020, which, if you guys recall, was exactly when things started to shut down because of COVID. So that was probably one of the most stressful couple weeks of my life. Because we had originally planned on, using my seasonal staff, to plant chunks of these trees at a time. But with COVID and the citywide, hiring freeze, we ended up having to have Dogwood Hills install them. Because by the time everything shut down, they had already come out of the ground. And so to delay that, would have severely impacted their ability to survive transplant. So we made the decision to go ahead and have a contractor install them, and I followed behind the truck full of mulch, and then the watering truck. I don't know if you guys remember or not too, but I had a number of sort of community engagement things that I had developed. Those kind of had to go by the wayside as well. I've been planning on, having our local robotics team engineer some really cool tree tags for us. Had board tags made, but even now in the midst of this pandemic, I don't think it's wise to be hanging things on people's doors. But I'm hoping that, as things settle down and as we sort of come to the other end hopefully soon of the crisis, that we can resume those activities and pull the community and sort of apprise them of trees and tree care and get people involved and get volunteer groups together, and that's the fun part. Really. So I have a lot of questions about the project, and I wanted to talk about those as well. I think a lot of people ask, why did you select that area? And the simple answer is that we have a critical mass of very critical trees that are clustered right in that particular neighborhood. You can kind of see it even without me having circled it, that there's a huge cluster of core and fair and critical trees that are in that neighborhood. It's predominantly a lot of silver maples, very large silver maples that are in various states of decline. And there have been a considerable amount of removals in that neighborhood over the last 10 to 15 years. When these trees were going in the ground, it was amazing to me how many people came outside and said, "Oh my gosh, I lost my trees 12 years ago. The city promised me new trees, and I thought they'd never come." So that was really good, that people were excited. They had missed their trees, and I understand why. Just a close-up of the 2010 and the 2020 tree surveys. You can see sort of the transition just visually. I haven't had time to go through and compile actual numbers of the new tree survey yet, but there's been just a steady pattern of loss and decline in status of the trees that are there. And if you look the second street up from the bottom on the right-hand picture, that's Thurman Avenue. That's probably one of the worst right now. All those red dots are some pretty desperate-looking silver maples that I don't anticipate will be around much longer. So that area was really just kind of in crisis. Another question I got too was, how come they were all clustered together? The simple answer is that tends to be logistically the most effective way of doing a planting. First and foremost, like I discussed a little bit, is the watering needs. After those trees go into the ground, they each need 20 to 25, sometimes 30 for our 3-inch caliber trees, 30 gallons of water a week. If I were to water all of the trees just back to back, that's all that I can do. It takes 2 days to get through all of them. And so in terms of being able to get to them for that required maintenance, for that watering, they need to be clustered together. And cities do this across the board. Typically when you see a planting, it's in a cluster. for logistical reasons. Another reason too is maintenance and regular monitoring. And also there's precedence here in Michigan City for that as well, which is, you guys will remember the 2011 Elsie Grove streetscape improvements, where that included, the installation of, I believe I counted 300 trees in those plans. And that was when Frank Salheimer was forester. Some of my record crew would have been around that long. They remember going and watering the trees with them. And it's that same process. You water one tree or two trees, you scoop the truck up 10 feet and hop back out and water the next. And so trees in clusters like this, that's just infrastructurally what makes the most sense. If they're spread around the city, it just makes it much more difficult to get to for those critical 3 years after transplant. We had a variety of species that were installed, 13 different species. And another question I got frequently too was why the particular size that we chose. I know a lot of people who wanted to see or ask why we didn't choose larger trees. And again, that has a lot to do with tree biology, transplantability, and also logistics. So there are trees that went into the ground, 1.5 to 3.5 inch caliber trees. And a lot of that has to do with, just the physical labor and logistics of planting. So when you're doing a ball and burlap tree, you typically, you need to have a proper size root ball to ensure that the tree can survive that root pruning and that installation. And so, if you have a 1 caliber inch tree, that's like a 12-inch root ball, which can weigh 200 pounds. So when you start getting up into the 2.5, the 3.5, and the 3-inch caliber trees, which are pretty big trees, then you end up with these root balls that are 600 pounds. And so, to be able to maneuver those into the ground properly takes, a lot of the, it takes the equipment. It's not something that you can do by hand. Again, irrigation capacity, the larger the tree, the more water they require on a weekly basis in those first 3 years. And so, if you have a 3-inch tree, that tree needs 25 to 30 gallons once a week to increase its, likelihood that it's going to survive transplant. The last reason for that size too is that larger trees are much more difficult to successfully establish. When you have a ball and burlap tree, you have to remove a large portion of those roots, even to maintain that proper root ball size. And that, is one of the leading factors in the transplant shock period, which is usually the first 3 to 4 growing seasons after transplant, where that tree is trying to reestablish the size of that root ball and length of those roots to catch up with the canopy and to be able to support itself. So the larger you get in terms of a caliber tree, the more of the root ratio is taken off for transplanting, which diminishes the likelihood that that tree will survive the transplant process. And reflecting this trend is that a lot of grants, they actually won't fund trees, they won't allow you to use grant money to purchase trees that are larger than 3.5 inch caliber, because they know that the likelihood that those trees are going to survive diminishes after you see the kind of sweet spot between 2.5 and 3 inches. Just sort of like a visual explanation of that is that a larger tree has to grow several seasons to be able to reestablish the root system that it lost because of transplant, whereas a smaller caliber tree can replace that ratio, can fill out that ratio in a much shorter amount of time, which means they have a much shorter transplant shock period. Whereas a larger tree is going to be under duress for a much longer period of time. And overall, this actually lends itself to the size of the overall tree after several years. So the larger tree, it has a much longer period of transplant shock when it's trying to reestablish that root-to-shoot ratio. And the smaller tree does not. So the smaller tree is going to resume normal growth rate in a much shorter time. And so after 10 to 12 years, you essentially have the same size tree, which is the tree that was larger. It has stunted growth for several more years. And so that's, that's why, we choose that size, that's why nursery stock tends to be in that 1.5 to 3 inch caliber. It's just because it makes the most, it makes the most sense in terms of survivability and establishment. And just a quick update on our new trees. We did lose one small white oak that it likely died over the winter before transplanting. It never budded out. That's going to be replaced this coming spring for warranty. We did lose one American bee to vandalism. One red oak did snap during a storm. I was able to prune it, but I'm always hopeful that I don't want us to be able to survive that kind of damage. And then, we did have a pretty severe drought this year. I think at one point we've gone 55 or 57 days without any rain. So I've got about 10 or 12 that are showing some signs of heat stress. I've been hitting those trees, trying to hit them twice a week when I can. I'm pretty hopeful though. I drove through and looked at the rest of them today, and most of them look really good. And so I'm going to get them all entered into our inventory this fall. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Jessica. One question, if you're playing around between the old programming, probably I think everybody here would like to see over the last 10 years. It's been trying over the last 10 years to plant trees because of the county tax situation that lasted 5 years. It was a good reason why we could get good planning going on in the last 10 years. The question is there any improvements in what we're doing? Over the last 10 years, we did have a noticeable difference in the 10 years preceding from 2000 to 2010. We made strides in taking down a lot, and took strides in maintenance, and then we did some moderate planning. We kind of got, we had one slide that it looked like we were at a net loss for as far as, I guess, the 10-year span really was sobering statistic that I was kind of very surprised that, from what I remember from 2000 to 2010, there was, before 2000, we were very proactive instead of reactive. In that time span of 2000 to 2010, there was a great push, and we did a good job. I'm sure Frank was with us, he was just showing up at that point in time, but I guess I would be eager to see what would happen in the next 10 years.
Me too.
We're hoping for that. So, all right.
I have a question. So what would you say would be the major way we can get the improved trees improved? What is the biggest problem causing them to be fair or poor?
I think a lot of it is a lack of pruning and maintenance early in their lives. So especially like the silver maples, you'll drive down the street and you'll see that they're like multi-stem, and a lot of that is because when they were younger, there wasn't a dominant, central leader that was established, and so as they grow, they'll grow to maturity, but then by the time they hit maturity, they're in such a state that those codominant stems are going to fail or they've got other issues. A lot of what I see too when I'm looking at them is, and this is early pruning as well, a lot of branches cross, and so they'll wound they'll wound themselves as they grow, and just invite decay. But I'd say one of our biggest problems is probably like the multi-stem trees that are in the rights of ways, and there's a lot of them.
So there's nothing we can do now to really boost that up because that was neglected at the beginning.
I would say there's like nothing we can do. I mean, what I'm trying to do is get to the ones that budgetarily we can handle that are like in the most dire need of maintenance, and just doing some not necessarily corrective structural pruning, but trying to lighten some of the load on some of those predominant stems, trying to, reel in overextended branches and things like that so that we can get some more years out of them. That's what I'm playing catch up a little bit.
I'm just curious, is there any kind of emergency help we can do with that?
Right.
Some of the history between the silver maples and that is the silver maples were planted, probably the last big community tree support was in the 60s and early 70s. Okay, when those trees were planted. Now those trees are 50, 60 years old. Silver maple could go on as 100 years, but they're like 80-year-old people. They need to be maintenance on. They need an operation, they need to prove it. They're not all going to make it through.
No.
So that's kind of the history of why most communities got silver maples. They were cheap, they were easy, readily available. They're growing, they're still, you can go to some of the nurseries. There's a big nursery out on the Falls North toward Heston out there. It's all they grow is maples. But they're not growing silver maples. They got the reds and, all the different varieties, more for landscaping type of purposes.
And as they age and as they reach maturity, trees will enter a natural stage of retrenchment where they do die back in their branches, and it's just they're shifting where they're putting energy. So rather than putting energy towards upwards growth, they start to grow in diameter. And so what I'm doing with a lot of the contractors is talking them through, a lot of people will call me and say, well, there's this tree, a lot of the branches at the top that needs to come down. And I'm like, you know what? We're going to mimic its own retrenchment therapy and, cut back to a live lateral, get the dead wood out, and then, let the tree do its thing as it ages and just keep an eye on it. I'm really conservative with removing trees. We do have a lot that have had to come down this year, but to me, that's an absolute last resort. If there's an inherent, risk that can't be mitigated by any other option. It's I'm trying to, work through different pruning techniques to elongate the life of these trees to the best that we can. Thank you.
It sounds like there's a need early in the life of the tree for a lot of pruning attention, plus a need for a lot of watering attention, and we want to plant a lot more trees. So this sounds like we need about 4 or 5 of you maybe.
I would love that. I just had a conversation with I can't remember his title exactly, but he runs the green spaces and as part of their forestry program and things like that in West Lafayette. And the way that and they're a city of about 48,000, so not too much bigger than us. And what they're trying to achieve in terms of that kind of staffing is to have housed under Parks and Recreation, urban forestry, and have, a lead forester, and then 2 level 1 foresters and 2 level 2 foresters to be able to go out and do all the assessments that are necessary to be able to go out and prune the young trees. I drive by a lot of our young trees and just get really stressed out because I'm, it's like, hang on, I'm coming. But we do have a lot of hazard trees, which is taking up most of my time, is going out and assessing and abating risk. And right now, that's probably about 85% of my time. It's just assessing high-risk trees. But I did see sort of what a fully staffed program would look like. I'm hopeful for next year that in having, my full vector staff, which will be helpful. planning some training programs so that I can hopefully train some of that staff to help me perform some of these functions. So I think that, we'll be able to move forward in that way a little bit next year. I've also, learned a lot, from other foresters and other cities. Right now, the way that I try to prioritize groups of work, is by risk assessment. And I know that Indianapolis follows a model. They've got a big matrix, on the different combinations of risk ratings that you can come up with while you're doing a risk assessment. And, a city that size that's got, 200,000 trees, it's like, anything that's not high or extreme risk, that maintenance has to be delayed because you have to meet a budget, and then also you're just constrained by the availability of labor and hours in a day. So that's kind of the model that I've been implementing over the last few months. Is really just based on risk assessment to help manage and prioritize the groups of work that really need to be prioritized. That's another reason too that I selected the nursery that we did, that we got the trees from, because they've already been structurally pruned. They are like ready to go be awesome street trees, and they're not going to need that structural pruning for a while now. So that's one of the reasons that I chose those trees. That structural pruning is already done.
Well, obviously, paid staff would be the best solution, but I wonder if there's any place for training volunteers to do some.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. West Lafayette and other cities too, they have various groups, tree stewards, tree friends, that are trained to do that work as well. And so I'm hoping with COVID, hopefully coming, abating sometime soon, that our volunteer groups can start coming together again, and that we can start those kinds of activities. Because like I said, that really is, it's more than just help with labor. It really is the fun part of this, is, engaging with the community and getting them excited about their urban forest and getting them excited about, helping out with those needs.
To tell you for coming into things when you did. I felt terrible for you for this year, you know what I mean? Because you have all this wonderful energy behind you, and I've been truly impressed by what you've tackled, given everything that was thrown at you, especially this year.
Thank you so much.
It's a bit impressive. Nick and I run our own maintenance crews, and you have a handful of people to help you as well. We know what it is just to do what we do. So for you to take care of everything that you have in the city, wow, impressive.
Thank you.
So although you may feel a little stifled for some of the exciting things that you really wanted to debut, don't let it stifle you, because I think it's been a truly impressive start that will really show. And this was a good year for you actually to be able to get your footing in, right, and have maybe a bit of breathing time to see what that all takes, because like you said, you're going to need more backup. You do need more backup to be able to tackle all the rest that you have ahead of you. But this, believe it or not, even with everything that maybe was deterred, was a perfect year for you to learn all of that,
I hope so.
Yeah, you did fantastic. I'm impressed. I'm excited about that new stuff, so.
I appreciate that.
But I do feel like what Louis said, there's somebody that, even if you can't get at least more staff, under you, if there's some way that could be a thing that the tree board could really do, is try to maybe highlight and push some additional volunteer help or some sorts of programs that are going to help them.
That would be great.
That could be an ideal project for us to work on.
That would be wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay. Just going down the list again, grant application, maintenance, anything out there?
Actually, a couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with someone about the CUP grant. We went, and the deadline was on the 25th, so he and I went kind of back and forth about whether I wanted to try to submit something for us this year, and I ultimately decided not to, because I wanted to be able to have conversations with you all, and confer with you all about what the best use of that grant would be. So of course you can apply for things like tree planting, but you can also apply for things like adding to our tree inventory. So this tree inventory, it only covered right-of-way trees, so we could apply for the grant to use it towards that. Or we could apply for a grant for someone to come in, a consultant to come in and help us develop a broader, more far-reaching urban forestry management plan. So there's a lot of different uses to that grant, and I didn't want to unilaterally make the call. Because I think with the new tree inventory that we have and the new planning that we've done, I think that's something that we need to have collective conversations about in terms of how to best think about what we would use that CUP grant for. And then secondly, how we can strategize to come up with a match, because it's a one-to-one match. And then another thing I'm sure most of you guys are aware of is that our budget has been substantially reduced, not just for next year, but also for the remaining 2020 year as well. In particular, like my contractual services budget, which is where we pay for all the tree work that we get done. That's where the match for our right-of-way inventory came from. We had, in previous years, we've had, and including 2020, we've had about $160,000 for that total, and next year that's been reduced to $95,000. And then for the remainder of this year, I believe it's been reduced, deobligated, about $30,000 or $40,000. So that's a concern that I have going into next year. I know after this year how expensive tree work is, and I know it's something that, especially in emergency situations, it can get quite expensive. So we're also, especially for the CUP grant, we're going to have to strategize about match. And so I think what it's going to have to come from is going to be, matching. I know that we can use like the hours of my salary related to the particular project that we choose, but also volunteer hours and things of that nature. And so I think we're going to have to do the footwork in that regard to come up with the necessary match. So there's two parts to that. So it's number one, having the collective conversations with you all, and number two, strategizing about how we're going to come up with a match. And so I foresee a lot of conversations about that in the coming months and into next year. So we're ready for that. We've already talked about how hard this year was, and COVID threw a wrench in a lot of things. Our departments, all departments right now, this year and next year, we're relegated to essential spending only. And so that's something to consider as well. Sort of coming up with a strategy for funding them also.
So if I could ask, I'm not sure what kind of grants you apply to, but I think it might be a good plan to have a few projects kind of outlined, ready to go, because I think just like other municipalities did not follow through on grants, so there may be money left over. They'll say, hey, could you use this money for a project? And if you have a project kind of somewhat ready, it would be very helpful, because I think some agencies are going to have a hard time giving away their money due to match or whatever problems they have. So I would just kind of say, maybe think about a few projects that are priorities for us that we can kind of have on the back burner, so that ready to go.
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what I meant by having these conversations in the coming tree board meetings. Really getting, like Dahlia said, a concrete project that this is definitely something that we want to move forward with, or a couple of them. And those are things that I think we need to develop collectively rather than just unilaterally. So yeah.
Obviously, we talked about purchasing our records, and we talked about tree plants. We did go down.
Sure.
I would not heard anything or seen anything from the planning department. Is there any planning issues that you're aware of?
I just had a question. We got the minutes from the July 28th Planning Commission, and there's a lot about the area of Woodland and 20.
Yes.
And I know some people who are actually not residents of the city, but who live near this area. They're very concerned about all the tree cutting that happened there. And I think we talked about it. And nowhere in the minutes is the trees mentioned. But I'm just wondering how this whole project relates to what was it, 17.02, that was approved after a lot of workshops and whatnot. How this project relates to that?
Well, the project down on 20, that came to our attention, not just my attention, but also the code enforcement and inspection department for a number of reasons. First and foremost, actually I think it came to our attention because the contractor was using our city dump illegally. And so I was called out because our code enforcement officer, our building inspector, got out there and saw that it's unsubdivided land and they were taking down the trees, without having gotten the required approved construction plans, without providing a tree survey, but essentially without following that ordinance. And so with that, and I think with the dump issues, that project was halted until plan review could take a look at it. And I think the planning commission actually halted it further, not because of the trees or anything, but because of the driveway cuts were going to pose like a traffic hazard or something.
Well, they approved it with recommendations or requirements.
Yeah, and to my knowledge, I don't think that they've done those yet, or that I don't know what the status is on that. If they're planning on, presenting something different, I'm not 100% sure yet. But that was, an incident that, triggered the tree ordinance, because it is, the tree ordinance applies only to unsubdivided land, so that land isn't subdivided yet. What it requires essentially is that, before, removing potentially protected trees, you need to have, the land needs to be subdivided and you have to have your approved construction plans. And then that will determine, what trees are exempt, which for a project like that, most of them are exempt. I think that's a common misconception with the tree ordinance is that, prevents you from removing trees. It really doesn't. It more or less, identifies trees that are protected that are of a certain size, over 8 inches, DBH, and most trees are going to end up being exempt because they either fall within the building footprint, they fall within the 10-foot buffer zone, they fall within what's going to need to be constructed for entrance and exit, they fall within a retention pond. So most trees in a project like that are going to be exempt. Some of them, might end up being protected and trigger the ordinance. But then even if you do remove those protected trees, the ordinance just requires a replacement on a particular kind of level that's going to be incorporated into the landscape.
Now, was that triggered because of the harvesting of these trees?
Yes, because he didn't have his construction plans approved and didn't have, the land wasn't subdivided yet. So I would say that gone through the process. That's been established, not just through that ordinance, but through construction plans, generally, which the ordinance is a part of. But it's just, essentially the tree ordinance just asks you to go through the process and get the trees identified, whether they're going to be exempt and what's not. But yeah, that did trigger.
So I'm still a little confused. Are there any consequences for them? Or they just have to go back and do things right and then build a parking lot?
I think they have to just go back and do things right. But that, like I said, I haven't been updated on that project in a while, as far as I know. The planning department, I don't think, has received any updates. I could be misspeaking though, I just haven't heard. So it's something that's gonna have to be assessed when everything is said and done, and the construction plans are approved, and everything is finalized. But I did receive a number of calls about that as well. People were really concerned with the clearing of that property.
Okay, anything else? Okay, urban forest management plan. I think we did that, we beat that up pretty good in your presentation.
Okay, thank you. I was like, I feel like I'm just reacting to things rather than planning ahead. But
Well, your presentation was over, it's a lot of that's why I had to come in and was just kind of going through the formalities right now. Tree City designation, that was achieved earlier this year.
yeah, I'm gonna start pulling together the reporting for that probably in, next month in November. That's not numbers, so we'll get that rolling pretty soon. But we did get our 20-year Tree City USA plaques and stuff. So that was exciting.
Okay. I guess goals, is, do we start thinking about some goals for 2021? What do we want to try to get there? I guess that kind of goes for number over here. Having projects, goals, type of thing. Fundraising efforts, I don't think we have anything like that going on. Whole business, workers' compensation insurance, we're going to table that. New business, the 2021 tree board budget approval. Everybody have a copy of the worksheet? Okay, salary and wages for board member compensation is $6,000. Employee benefit employer share is $459 for a total of $6,459. Office supplies, it's $100. Other services, membership dues, $500. Other services, charges, education, $1,000. For a total of $8,059. Yes, the budget would be looking for approval for $8,059. Now, does this reflect the budget?
After hearing,
Yes.
I don't believe so.
So, should this probably be tabled?
I believe something you submitted, correct?
This is what the controller's office submitted.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what was submitted, but then after the budget hearings with the finance committee, I know that they recommended some cuts.
Yes, and this is, that has to be reconciled at the city council meeting on Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly.
So they recommended some cuts, but they're not final until the council approves them.
So we should probably table this and wait for a revised.
They will probably decide.
Or is it asking you to approve what the controller submitted?
Yeah, I think that.
And so I think approving this is fine.
Yeah.
And then we're just gonna have to wait and see what happens with council.
That's what you're submitted.
Yeah, usually we approve this and then.
Yeah, so that's okay.
That's what it sounds like.
I Yes, from the chair. I'll make the motion to approve this budget as per the controller's office. And we will go from there if there is to be modified after that.
Second.
Everybody okay?
Okay.
The worksheet budget for the upcoming 2021 year has been approved by the Michigan City Treasurer for $8,059. Okay, any more new business? No more new business. Board member comments.
I just want to express the sorrow of the people for your lost city. I
I'm going to follow up. Actually, I think Jessica, I attended the city council meeting 2 weeks ago. And Don Presbynsky had a question for Jessica on the appearance of the Wabash Street there and the outlet. I think it was, I know, and sort of Laura, that I run 6, 7 guys, Laura runs 6, 7, 8 guys. A city, Michigan City, that Jessica has 5 guys. That has to run the whole gamut of Michigan City. It's hard enough for us to keep our guys working like that. And I think Don's question is kind of really well. You know, we can't, him expecting us to drop everything, and clean up, trimming the trees and the weeding. I do appreciate Jessica and the crew to get out there and mow the lawn and mow the grass over there. And to him to come down and not see what everybody has been utterly discusses was something that I've thought about since this whole issue came about. I just don't know what he expects the city employees to do. With 40 hours a week, and the amount of work they have. We're trying to do probably more work than we did last year with less people. Some got to do it. I'm just saying that from my position that I don't know what his premise was for the
And it's again why I brought up what I did earlier, to acknowledge. I think it's really important to acknowledge the successes that you've accomplished in such a short amount of time, number one, and with such a small group. Like Nick said, we both have 8 to 9 men. My crew work over 40 hours easy every week to get it done, and they're not taking care of the city. You are taking care of the city. Doing a wonderful job. If there are expectations of more on any end, then there needs to be some more support of more help and assistance in that. And that's what should be coming through, and maybe as we take those comments come in, maybe that is something that we need to acknowledge and have those people help us get more support into it in some manner, So
that'd be extremely helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, as I briefly mentioned in that council meeting, and also here too, this year has been extremely challenging for my department. So with the COVID shutdown, typically we bring our crews back at the beginning of April. We couldn't bring them back until I finally got the authorization to bring back half of what we typically have at the end of May. And so just to try to stay on top of anything that we could, myself and my assistant vector control officer were out on mowers, for 2.5 months, just trying to stay on top of any little thing that we could, and it was very overwhelming. And then when we got our crews back, we had 4. We got the 1 crew back. We also do private property abatement as well, and so we had, not issued citations until we could get crews back, because we didn't have the labor to enforce them. And so when we finally did get the crews back, then we also started issuing citations for private properties where the grass has already gotten that high. And so typically in a year, my department will issue anywhere from 200 to 300 citations that we then have to re-inspect and abate if they've not been maintained. And so, it was a lot, and we had to make the decision to prioritize public health and safety over aesthetics. I think a lot of people, no one likes to look at their neighbor's house with 4-foot tall grass, but it does harbor a lot of vector, and it does create potentially, unsanitary and dangerous conditions. And I think that's sort of like an overlooked element of, what the mowing crews do is, it's not just aesthetics, but it's public health and safety. And that had the labor that we had, it just had to take precedent. There was no other way around it.
I appreciate that, and that's what you do. I prefer not to see you on the lawn. Okay? It's not why you were hired.
Right. Well,
but I understand the circumstances that you were under.
Right. It had to get done, and there was nobody else to do it. And I'm the type of person that I'm going to jump in where I can. But also those 2.5 months, it took away from so much of my other responsibilities. And so even once we did get to hire back, it was like by then everything was just so behind, and we were coming from behind all season. And I told my guys, the 4 guys that have been working like crazy, and we weren't allowed to use overtime because of the budget. So there was that. But I told my guys, that they really did a great job keeping up with what they were able to keep up with, just 4 of them. And then on top of that, droughts, I guess, can be good. It hadn't rained anymore this season. We would not have been able to do it. We wouldn't have been able to keep up with it if we had gotten any more substantial rainfall. So the drought saved us in that regard in terms of being able to stay on top of just the mowing. So I appreciate that a lot.
It was a fantastic job. That acknowledgement is important because I think everybody out there needs to understand the layers to all of the things that make it all happen in your one position.
Yes. This is kind of like a couple more comments from the chair there. We've had 6 months, and we've also been battling the all presidents been wanting to repeal the landscape tree items in this new ordinance here. They're putting it on the table, taking it off the table. So a couple of weeks ago. I do have to remind all the board members that we spent 2 years horse trading, going back and forth. His predecessor, Mrs. Carnes, was right there working with us, so was the whole city council. I think it's a quick slap in the face when we have to go and the evidence hasn't really, it's just starting to make sense and working its way out. And I think, that the city people, the city fathers, we have to let see everything work its way out. If there's a problem, and we would just sort of come to meeting or the city planner saying, we have this issue here, we need to work it out. I'm not ready to give in to this repeal type thing. It's been told to me that if it was repeatedly looked at by the planning commission that it wouldn't go anywhere. But, we have so many other things to do in the city than worry about these little teeny items. I don't know what else, I try to stick up and talk about it, but when we all show up and all gets cold feet and doesn't want to go with it, and we're going to have to be educated. He's been educated as much educated as he's going to get. He wants to have a workshop. Again, resources have to be used by the avenues, like having a workshop, whether an issue that is a non-issue. That is my opinion and the chair. I will close it out by any public comments, or if anybody else has any comments, any important comments.
Just want to say I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
We're so happy to have you here. Yeah, it's yours. Yeah, first official one. Welcome. Thank you so much.
Just another little added, it would have been nice to meet you before then. We were looked at by the overall state forest. We did have kind of some things that we needed to look into as far as having numbers. We needed more mail numbers. We needed a replacement of mail. And it was kind of
She's our council meeting liaison.
okay, I'm just saying.
The new member.
I'm just saying that Bill was here. I wish I could have been.
There's too many women.
They actually did say that.
There's 200 years of previous non-women, so I believe so.
So I would have been respectful of the mayor, would have called me up and said, what do you think? Usually when we pick a number, we have a couple names to go around and see what it is.
Well, in the city council, I have to say, it was me and Paul who wanted to be in this board.
Okay.
I beat him by 1 vote. Just saying.
Yeah, so she's our council liaison. Elena, your side of the new members, is not here tonight.
Oh, she did, okay.
Yeah, so she's our council liaison.
Okay, then I'm not as, but it's been, where we have to have some more diversity. And we all want more diversity. I would like to see diversity, not male or female, but across the board. Purple, white, pink, I don't care.
To bring in another member or two, or no? Like, is that an option?
I don't really need to be right numbers, but we just have to make it clear that we need to diversify, and it has been told to us that, it's usually the opposite way around. There's too many males, they're looking for females. Okay? The state forester was quite surprised to see that, what we've had done. That's what I'm looking for, is just to, have a little more diversity in the board itself. And the only way to find out is actually to see what's out there. As far as experiences, I'm sure there's a lot of different folks with a lot of different experiences. So that, okay. Public comments. No more public comments. Next meeting. October 28th, 2020. Is this more or less going to be than the schedules? Because usually we get it the first part of the right now.
So see everybody in the first time, or?
John's taking them. Okay.
Okay. All right.
We're happy with the meeting. We sorely need it. So, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I move for adjournment.
Everybody in favor?
All right.
Thank you very much, everybody.